This is a question that might be on the minds of many, particularly those that are new to Bitcoin. Who owns the most Bitcoin, and do you want to know if you yourself can still get into the top 5? We did some research, so if you want to know who are now in the top 5, just sit back, relax and keep on watching. Welcome back to Bitcoin for Beginners. I'm your host Adriaan, and in this series we will look at the top 5s of everything Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And this episode is a top 5 of richest Bitcoin holders. As always, we will cover this content with no frills nor fluff. We are not investment advisors and our content is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing in this video should be construed as investment nor financial advice. First of all, how do we determine who has the most Bitcoin? As you know, all Bitcoin transactions are recorded in a public ledger, and by means of each latest transaction, the so-called UTXO, we can see how much Bitcoin is owned by each address in existence. One problem though, because each address is a random string of characters, from most addresses we don't know who is the owner, unless that particular address has already been identified. Another point is that every wallet can contain multiple addresses, which means that even if you know the owner of one address, he may have more addresses in his wallet with more Bitcoin. Furthermore, a person can also have multiple wallets. Blockchain analysis firms can usually identify for a lot of addresses that they belong to one individual or wallet, but if there is no identity attached in the analysis, you still don't know who it belongs to. So we may have some insight in who the richest Bitcoin holders are, but we can't usually tie them to specific wallet addresses, which makes it hard to track in reality. Even though there is hardly any dispute about the number 1 richest Bitcoin holder, the rest of the top list may vary from who makes the actual list. Also, over time, the number 2 to 5 of wallet holders may shift if holders sell their coins or large purchases are made by another person or entity. First, we will look at some Bitcoin statistics about wallet addresses. It is interesting to know that only 0.46%, which is less than 1 out of 200 of all Bitcoin addresses, have 10 Bitcoin or more, and all of these addresses own 85% of all Bitcoin in existence. Then 50% of addresses have less than 0.001 Bitcoin, which is the equivalent of about $30 to $40 or less around this time. Important to note is that most of these addresses may probably be dust addresses or change addresses that actually belong to larger wallets. Addresses with less than 1 Bitcoin altogether own less than 5% of all Bitcoin. Keep in mind that some of the largest Bitcoin wallets, like exchanges, technically hold Bitcoin of their users. So although on-chain it may seem as if a lot of Bitcoin is concentrated in a few hands, the reality is that a lot belong to an enormous amount of other people. Of course, it is ill-advised to keep a substantial portion of your Bitcoin on an exchange for a prolonged period of time, because not your keys, not your Bitcoin. Now, if we look at the top 10 of richest Bitcoin addresses, we already can see that the richest Bitcoin address is owned by Huobi Exchange and is part of its cold wallet that contains about more than 140,000 Bitcoin. And that is the equivalent of about 5 million USD. Another big exchange wallet address is Bitfinex that holds about 78,000 Bitcoin. If you enjoyed this video so far, help our channel by giving it a like. Let's move on to the actual top 5. In this episode, we will start at number 1. It is well established that Bitcoin's mysterious and disappeared inventor Satoshi Nakamoto owns an estimated 980,000 Bitcoin, which is about 5% of all Bitcoin in circulation. Nobody knows exactly how much is in his wallets, but they have calculated it from the time he started mining Bitcoin, of which he is assumed to be the only one during the first period. And although there are probably thousands of addresses that are his, we only know about one address for sure, which is the Genesis block address that he mined first and has about 68 Bitcoin. Interestingly, there is still Bitcoin sent to this address. Almost none of the suspected wallet addresses from Satoshi have ever moved coins since his disappearance. The second richest Bitcoin owner is the Grayscale's Bitcoin Trust GBTC, which currently owns around 600,000 Bitcoin, which is pretty much guaranteed second place in this top 5. GBTC is the largest investment fund owning Bitcoin and pretty much the only one that is most accessible within traditional finance and has grown enormously the past couple of years, which is why they had to buy this gigantic amount of Bitcoin to be able to meet the demand of investors, which is often too high, and therefore very high premiums above the Bitcoin price have to be paid for shares in GBTC. A very unusual Bitcoin holder might be the Bulgarian government. They seized about 213,000 Bitcoin in 2017 from criminals. And although the government did not make statements about the plans or ownership status, It is generally assumed that the Bulgarian government might still be in possession of the coins, which would rank them third richest Bitcoin owner. As we just saw in the top 10 list of richest addresses, the number 1 richest address belongs to Huobi Exchange, and I think it is safe to assume that the 4th position of richest Bitcoin owner belongs to Huobi Exchange, with over 140,000 Bitcoin. And even though theoretically those Bitcoins belong to Huobi users, the Huobi wallet does technically hold the coins in practice. Then the number 5 holder of Bitcoins is likely to be the curator of Mt. Gox Exchange. As you may know in Bitcoin's history, the then largest 90% market leader Bitcoin exchange went bankrupt because 850,000 Bitcoin were stolen from the exchange. And since then a long bankruptcy process has been going on. In recent years, the curator has even sold massive amounts of Bitcoin from the Mt. Gox bankruptcy pool, which was suppressing the price a period of time. The bankruptcy process is still ongoing and victims still need to be paid out. The latest report is that the curator still holds 140,000 Bitcoin, but it may very well be that those could be sold or paid out to victims in the very near future. There is, however, another contender for the number 4 or number 5 position, and that is the Winklevoss twins, who are the founders of Gemini Exchange. Around 2013, they were able to buy 1% of the total amount of circulating Bitcoin at that time, which would total for around 120,000 coins, which in 2015 they said not going to sell. And if they even have stacked more Bitcoins in the past years from the profits of Gemini, it is not unlikely they own a lot more than the initial 120,000 Bitcoin, which would place them potentially in this top 5 as well, instead of perhaps the Mt. Gox curator. As you can see, it is going to be very hard to beat the top 5 Bitcoin whales if you hadn't already bought Bitcoin in the very early days and never sold them. Even to get in the top 100 richest addresses, you still need to have at least 10,000 Bitcoin, being $350 million or more. But probably one of the most important lessons that can be learned from the early adopters, who are now unlikely to ever be surpassed by newer investors, is they hodled the vast majority of their coins. And this is obviously no investment advice, just an observation. And while they started when not even 0.1% of the world population owned Bitcoin, nowadays it is still only less than an estimated 2%, so still a tiny percentage and still enough room for growth to become a small whale ourselves in the future as well, even if the top 5 or even the top 100 may never be within reach. Either way, it will require strong hands to become a Bitcoin whale. That's about all. This is Adriaan reporting for Bitcoin for Beginners. Stay with us and watch one of our other videos next.